Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of our Sleeping Barber. Now, with Cannes firmly in that rearview mirror, I'm thrilled to welcome back a returning guest, David Tiltman. David wears two really impressive hats, actually. He's the Chief Content Officer at WARC and also the SVP of Content at Lines Intelligence. David, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back. Sorry Mark can't be here, but it's great to see you, V.
Yeah, Mark's on the mend, couldn't join us today, but he and I were both really eager to kind of get your take on this year's festival. So we're glad that you agreed to come back and help us give us that retrospectives.
Yeah, very happy to.
So, it's funny. Back in 2008, I was a young lion, right? And I remember taking in the festival. And even at that time, I was like, holy smokes, this is incredible. It's so many things to do. Now, fast forward to 2025, I had the exact same feeling, but I can tell you, it was like 10x what I remember what the festival was like in 2008. It's evolved so much. I'm curious, like, as you've seen this continue to grow, where do you see it going then over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, it's a great question. I think because anyone who sort of has not been, who's listening to this and hasn't been, the first thing anybody says when they go for the first time is just, wow, I never knew it was this big.
Right?
Because it is seriously impressive. And what people have to sort of understand is the festival in its entirety, which includes what's called the sort of fringe, or the stuff that happens outside the sort of core festival, and takes over the entire town of Cannes. So
exactly.
And what that represents is basically the entire marketing value chain is represented within this town by the sea in the south of France. So I've often described Cannes as a sort of choose your own adventure operation. Like,
so true.
My week is very focused on sort of what the WARC and the Lines Intelligence teams are doing, which is in and around the Palais. I'm often very focused on the sort of effectiveness side, and I can have a very happy week basically talking about marketing effectiveness, marketing strategy. Somebody else will have an entirely different week talking about retail media or something like that. And someone else will be deep in the ad tech weeds somewhere else. And then a lot of people like to do, a bit of everything. That's the sort of joy of it. So from a marketing point of view, kind of all human life is here. It's I love that. An extremely sort of stimulating week, and you can have conversations with all sorts of people that you may not even have expected to. Where it goes in the next 5 years, I hesitate to sort of put a firm prediction on it, but what I think it is safe to say is it will reflect however the industry is developing. So
fair enough.
I think if you compare the industry in 2008 when you sort of first went, or sort of around 2011 when I first went, the big change between then and now is that the biggest players on the Croisette are like the big digital platforms, and just the number of logos are now there, whether that's on the media side, the tech side, the client side. I mean, it's insane. Whereas back then it was more focused on the holdcos, the agencies, and some completely some clients. So it has grown in a way that reflects the developments within the broader industry, and that's the industry at its biggest, at its most maximal, and it will continue to do that because it has become the global meeting place for all the players in that value chain.
I absolutely love that you touched on like the two, almost like the two parts of the festival, or like the two festivals, the festival within the festival. And it's kind of hard to explain because you're right. There's the Palais, and Mark and I spend the majority of our time there, to be honest with you, because we're just immersing ourselves with thought leadership around there. Obviously, we're really keen on the effectiveness side. Yeah. Did you get a chance to spend any time on the Fringe at all? And kind of like enjoy the Croisette and.
Yes, a bit. I mean, I deliberately, I try to make time. I think I had a block in my Tuesday where we didn't have any sort of sessions on, so I went off and went and saw some of the things on the beaches. Went out to the sport beach and caught a couple of sessions there, and but a lot of the things that take place in Cannes are, so there's a spontaneity of it. So it's grabbing a coffee with someone you bump into.
That's so true.
But it's also, I went to listen to a live recording of a podcast I really enjoy. There's just lots of these little opportunities, and everyone gets FOMO in Cannes. There's always 5 things that you could be doing. And I think I guess I'm speaking now on behalf of the people who put the content together in the Palais. What we've had to do, and this is very true of the sort of effectiveness sessions that you spend, the creative impact sessions that you spend time in, is we've really tried to dial those up and make them really compelling and really interesting and really practical. So whether it's sort of, dropping a new piece of thought leadership, or getting a really interesting brand to come and tell their story, or mixing a number of different sort of researchers together to tell a sort of new story, or so we try and make it sort of really compelling to be there, because the last thing you want in Cannes is to be sat in an extremely dry research presentation when you could be on a yacht or on a beach or let's say,
when you put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So in this year, we had some great sessions this year, but we had, the team behind the Cost of Dull project. So Adam Morgan from Eat Big Fish, they came to drop some new research with Karen Nelson Field. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's about proving that dull advertising costs you money, basically. And they're trying to flip the script on creative effectiveness. And they did something really brilliant this year. They invented a perfume called Ennui, which is French for boredom, for those of you who are not French or Canadian. And they gave out these little testers, these little cards with a little spray of this perfume.
It smelled like
it was horrible. It was horrible. And then you realize when they say, it smells of burning money.
It's brilliant, though.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I had one of these bottles for the rest of the week, and I had to text the team because I was like the Eat Big Fish team. So I need to give this back to you because I'm not taking this in my suitcase home in case it explodes or something. Never get that smell out. But yes, that was a lot of fun. And then we had Duolingo on stage with like a massive, somebody in an owl costume, things I never would have 5 years ago. I never would have thought I would see this on like a walk oriented stage. But it is, we are trying to make effectiveness entertaining and make it relevant for that sort of very FOMO driven Cannes moment.
Yeah, and I love that you touched on that, because I think Cannes for the longest time was, at least had this notion that it was just about creativity, full stop. Like that, this is what you went to do and celebrate. And not that it's a terrible thing. However, what you just touched on, it shows that, like, not only the evolution, the fact that we are spending a lot more time on the effectiveness side, and I don't know, maybe I'd love your take on this, but as the industry continues to evolve, do you feel like we as marketers are just getting better in understanding effectiveness, or we're just getting better at talking about it?
Great. I could break that down in a few different ways. So firstly, there is still a very strong part of the festival which is about the creative inspiration and understanding the craft, the craft of marketing communications, and that's really important. And I wouldn't want to sort of take away from that, because that still is at the core of the festival, and ultimately what brings that whole marketing value chain that I talked about earlier together in one place is this sort of celebration of the creative idea and the power of great craft. So that's definitely at the core. But look, the industry's changed a lot since you and I first went down, and I think it has never been more important, particularly in the sort of economic environment we're in at the moment, to be able to put that creativity in a commercial framework and to understand how it is connected with a broader business sort of business dynamics, and why you should be investing in that creativity. Now, I will sort of show off a bit and say that we at WARC sort of recognized that all the way back in 2014, and we at the time we weren't owned by the people who owned Cannes at the time. We were still a scrappy little independent, and we knew the team, the Cannes team. So we went to see them, and we said, look, we think there's a real appetite for this. We've been to Cannes. We've seen that there are strategists there, and increasingly there are clients there who are interested in learning a little bit more about how to connect creativity to a sort of commercial agenda.
Sure.
And they went, yeah, you're probably right. Have a room and go and test test the hypothesis. And look, the first room was, I know there are still some people in the industry who remember this because they still talk about it. It was literally a broom cupboard up the top of the Palais near the toilets, so we could fit but we sort of managed to fill it and do a day full of sessions, and then that sort of grew over time. In fact, there's this one. I think it's a slightly apocryphal story, but I always tell it because I think it's a sort of sign of when. For me, it's the sign of when Cannes started to shift. Was we were running this session. It was about strategy, future strategy session, and the great Paul Feldwick, ex planner from the UK, famous author. He was hosting a session, and we had probably about 200 people in a room that was designed to fit about 100, maybe 80 or something like that. There were people like spilling out the back and struggling to get in. And Phil Thomas, who's he's still the executive chairman of Cannes, he's a very well-known figure in the industry, but he was the guy who really helped drive the expansion of Cannes. And he walked past and assumed it must be the Lady Gaga press conference. So we thought, I better go and check. I better go and have a look.
Let's
inside.
go check in on that.
Yeah, let's go and check in on that. So he sort of fought his way in and then found himself trapped in a session about strategy. It wasn't that much longer that we ended up being acquired by Cannes and Essential, who were the owners of Cannes. And the rest, as they say, is history. I think the next big shift was a few years ago after the pandemic, after we all came back from the pandemic, and we consciously made the decision to stop doing this sort of semi-fringe, just give us a room and we'll sort it out for a day. And we brought that sort of effectiveness and strategy stream into the main programming at Cannes. It's now called the Creative Impact Stream. And we really set out, our big sort of vision there was, we need to build the world's biggest effectiveness event that happens to live within the world's biggest creativity event, and make it really clear that those two things should sit next to each other and not be two separate conversations.
I love that. And you can tell, as someone that, went back for the first time in 2025, you could really see like the both sides. And from a WARC perspective, you guys released the Multiplier effect earlier this year.
Yes.
Like, you're really seeing this narrative really building up. And I would argue, I think as the industry has responded quite positively to a lot of this literature. And obviously, like in every interview I went to, it was packed.
Yeah, it was great. And we saw, obviously we mentioned
every session, sorry.
We mentioned the multiplier effect in some of our sessions, but then other people were spontaneously mentioning it. It was fantastic. I think what's interesting is, so there is a sort of real sort of groundswell of interest in this sort of thinking. And I think it is important for those of us who've been around this space for a long time, firstly, not to assume that everybody already knows it.
Yes.
And secondly, to be able to communicate some of the sort of really the most important points of a principles of effectiveness, I guess, in a language and in a manner that is absorbable by a much broader range of people that would normally absorb it. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So the big shift from us at WARC going from a small room that might hold 150 people in the Palais to the Rotonde, which is the bigger stage that a lot of our content was on this year.
Yep.
That's going from, trying to attract crowds of 150 to 200 to 700 to 900. Now, yes, we can do that a little bit by making it more entertaining, and yes, more people are interested in effectiveness than maybe they were before, but we've also got to create sessions that can appeal to the broader Palais audience, which includes,
of course,
just strategists or research nerds or that sort of
great
thing.
Point.
Or podcasters. It's it's creatives, it's clients of all different natures and types, and so we need to be talking in a language that really sort of resonates with them. And you mentioned the multiplier effect. We were very conscious in that, not to try and overload the jargon, to try and explain things from sort of first principles up. And while it was rooted in very solid data from very credible partners, we wanted to be able to talk about that in a way that could really resonate beyond the sort of normal 200 people on LinkedIn who engage with this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Was there any new trends or frameworks that really stood out to you over the course of the 5 days that you may have been able to take in?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that stood out to me. So, and I would, of course, encourage everybody to download the Creative Impact Unpacked report, which
yes, I'll link that.
WARC produced. Yeah, that would be great because we go into a lot of detail there. So a few things are interesting. Couple of sort of interesting sort of thought starters for me were Karen Crum from EY Parthenon talking about how we've got to stop encouraging clients to be brave. Like bravery is for policemen or firemen or army servicemen or doctors. What we need to understand is risk and how organizations manage and control risk, and really, again, adopting a language that the rest of the business can understand. So that was one thing that really stood out. There's another thing that Laura Jones, great CMO of Instacart, talked about, where she was talking about the multiplier effect and how she put some of that into practice within Instacart. And she said the unlock for her, particularly with the CFO, was to move them away from channel ROAS and a real fixation on what's the ROAS out of Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and create this idea of portfolio ROAS. And again, it's just a language thing. It's sort of moving the conversation into a language that CFOs will really resonate with them, because what CFO doesn't love a portfolio? You talk about a portfolio of investments and they move at different rates at different times. And when one thing is suffering, the other one takes over. So I love those two. But if there's one big dominant theme that came out of this year's, it is this year's Creative Impact. It's this tension between what best practice is telling us, which is all around being consistent. And we have Mark Ritson talking about basically marketers, instead of introducing a new ad campaign, they should just go and have a bath, smoke a cigar, and and wait.
That was priceless.
Which is very entertaining. It's data backed. Yeah, he's not just making this up. There's loads of data that if you have a good ad doing some good work, then it doesn't run out. Just leave it and let it run its course over time. In System 1 are banging that consistency drum a lot as well. But there is a real tension between what best practice and theory is telling us and the way marketing practice is developing. And that's not because any sort of individual wants to be ineffective or wants to create rubbish work or anything like that. But the drivers in the industry, and the two specific ones that we call out, are the sort of rise of sort of generative AI and how the rise of automated creativity, and Mark Zuckerberg telling people just to plug him into their bank account and he'll do the rest. And then the rise of creators, and that whole sort of creator economy is like a parallel media and creative vehicle. These two things are leading to an explosion in the number of assets that advertisers are having to create. Tom Roach flagged a client of Jellyfish, his agency, that had gone from 300 to 3,500 assets per year within the space of 6 years. And that was up to 2023. That you push that forward and you're going to get at least another 10x. So that sort of what Tom and Grace Kite call lots of littles world how you join that up with a sort of body of marketing theory that emphasizes consistency, emphasizes the need for people to recognize a brand, and having consistency of message and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's not unsolvable, but they are clearly at odds, and it's becoming harder and harder for anyone sat in the middle, whether that's a CMO or their agency groups or whatever, to hold that in. So that's a big thing. I think that's a really big thing that's come out of Creative Impact this year. And look, in the report we talk about different ways you can start to think about it, whether that's platforms or systems or universes, but just on to go back to the creators point, we had 2 or 3 different bits of research over the course of the week that showed just how poor a lot of the work that's being done in the creator space is at driving brand recognition.
Right.
And there's lots of evidence that if you get it right, that it can be a really credible and powerful channel,
100%,
or vehicle or whatever. But the majority, maybe even the vast majority of campaigns in that space are struggling to get the basics right.
Yeah, just one thing I want to touch on that, because I agree and love everything that you said there. What was it? How do they position it? It's like ads don't wear out, they wear in.
Yes.
And when I originally saw a lot of that literature, and there's a point where it kind of goes off, and you know what, we as marketers just get sick of our own creative, and then we just feel like the need. But I also thought, like, we have all the platforms. You think the Googles, the Metas of the world, they're like, oh, CTRs are going down, wear out's in play.
Yeah.
And like the one thing is at odd with the other, right? Which it creates like this really weird environment that we're operating in, because really great creative, I think there's a lot to warrant to say, yeah, you could probably build it and have it stand the test of time over 3, 4, 5 years. But I think one thing that's missed, and I don't think anyone's really saying Mark Ritson insinuated that you just, put it out and forget about it. But it's like, how do you build from that main creative and you do little smaller iterations? So you talked about the lots of littles. I think that's how you can kind of bring those together in a way that you're still leaning on some really great creative that has that mental availability, the great recall, etc., but then continuing to evolve that over time to showcase, different entry points, if you will, for the consumer.
And it ties into the whole brand versus performance thing, and
yes.
A lot of what the platforms want lots and lots of novelty because they want to drive immediate clicks, and that is within more of your sort of performance framework. It sounds obvious when you say it. It sounds obvious that, oh yes, you need a big brand idea that you can then have these sort of big emotionally engaging stuff, and then all the sort of little bits all ladder back up into that idea, and that came through in a number of different sessions. But I think being able to say it and being able to do it are very different things.
100%.
And it brings back to what I was saying earlier, that there is a craft element here that often gets missed. The actual craft of being able to do this stuff is not easy, and it's not easily automated either. If anything, I think there is a growing importance of the upstream stuff, deciding who you are, what you stand for, what messages you need people to take from your work, how you need them to feel, and how you tie all of that together. That's a huge piece of work. That's more important than ever before. And it's really unclear at the moment who does that work, because in the agency world, everything's become so project driven and siloed, and then clients aren't always set up to really do the thinking there. So there's a gap there in the industry that's sort of opening up.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be remiss not to highlight that Mark Ritson came back for the second time. Probably
Yes, he did. I've got a gag about that. It's a prime example of attitude change following behavior change, which is one for the behavioral scientists out there.
Yeah, it's funny because for those that have followed Ritson for a long time, obviously one of the biggest naysayers, a little bit of like the creative effectiveness, the festival in of itself. But great to see him to come back. But living in North America, the one thing, for me and Mark that kind of said, even though he didn't talk about Canadians, so maybe we're a little bit off the hook, he did really make some pointed comments around Americans and North American businesses, etc. they're kind of falling behind to the rest of the world and a lot of the literature and a lot of the studies. What's kind of your take on that? And what are you actually seeing from a boots on ground perspective?
Yeah. So look, he has been very mean about American marketers. I understand to some degree where he's coming from, in that there is a body of literature that has grown up in other markets, UK, obviously, Australia, and awareness of that body of literature is probably not that high outside the sort of big international networks and the big the sort of big international clients. Does that mean American marketers are not effective? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I buy it. So I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, America is at I don't need to tell you this, but it's very, very big. It's a very, very big market. And at the top end, it is the most sophisticated marketing market in the world. And I don't think we should sort of ignore that the world's most effective advertising often does come out of the US, whether that is McDonald's or P&G or others. So there is a very long sort of middle market, if we can get onto a long tail, where but that middle market probably exists everywhere. It's just much bigger in the US than I agree than in other markets. And yes, look, that there is a lot of education and a lot of potential in that sort of market. Now, where I sort of disagree with Mark is that we just sort of need to go over and tell all these sort of, people in sort of mid-sized businesses across the US just to read Binet and Field, or, because we've been down that path for a while now. And the questions we've always been asked, and I speak up from a WARC point of view here, whenever we present any of that data, the question we're always asked is, this is great, but where's the US data? Like you're presenting a few hundred cases from the UK, or something an Australian academic has come up with. Why should we believe you? And look, you can criticize that attitude, but it is a real attitude. There is a sense 100%. In the US that it has to be shown to work in the US. They don't like stuff. I mean, they don't like stuff coming in from outside. Like we've seen that this year. There's a sort of intellectual tariff that they charge on ideas from overseas. We've got, as the what if you want to call it, the effectiveness community, we've got to respond to that. We've got to be alive to 100%. That, and we've got to prove our case using US data. And go back to the multiplier effect, which is something I was very close to, and we sort of led at WARC. We deliberately chose a series of partners with deep US data, so that everything we could put in that report was a US data point or a US example, or a North American, but largely US. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to end this slightly pointless debate about whether the sort of principles of effective marketing really play out in the US versus the rest of the world, and actually get everybody engaged from a sort of moving from a why to a how, because that for me is actually where the biggest issues are now. We do have a bunch of theory that it's not settled. Like we can all have little arguments about differentiation versus distinctiveness and all that sort of thing. But there is a body of thinking that is relatively settled at a top level. Yeah. The difficulty is how you put it into practice. And I'd much rather try and move the debate on from this work here, does this work in the US as well as the UK, and get on to a sort of debate about, okay, look, we know these things sort of work. How do you actually do it in a market where it feels like every trend and every driver is pushing us further away from that best practice?
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. It's funny that you bring up, like, is it just about, getting every mid-sized small business reading Les Binet, Peter Field, Adam Morgan?
I love Les and Peter, by the way, just to be very clear. I do love them, but
big fans over here. Don't worry.
But I do feel like we deliberately did that with the multiplier effect, that presented it as a sort of native US piece of thinking.
And I have to say, it's one of the studies, even that at my day-to-day job was picked up by nearly everybody. And like, it's like ding, 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 ding. We get it now. Right.
Fantastic.
And I think that's incredibly
great
powerful.
To hear. That's great to hear. I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. So Mark and I were actually really fortunate, and we got invited to the Lines Intelligence party where, you know, it was kind of like the
Yes, you snuck in. You snuck past the bouncers.
We snuck in through behind the curtain there, and you know, you guys really revealed the app in of itself, and you know, the way I see it, obviously, it can help both marketers, creatives, strategists as a whole. But can you please just take a moment and discuss Lines Intelligence? And I'm sure you've been quite close to it.
Yeah, yes, very close. So, again, not everybody knows this. So, Lions is now a sort of like a division. It's part of this much bigger group called Informa. But Lions Group now owns a number of brands that I think in their space are sort of best in class. So, if you we've just been talking about Cannes Lions, WARC in the sort of effectiveness space. A couple of years ago, we acquired a Contagious, which is a sort of it focuses on sort of breakthrough creativity and sort of cultural and technology trends, that sort of thing. And then we recently acquired the Effies. Now, the goal of what is called Lines Intelligence, the sort of division, is to bring those brands are still very important. We still believe that each of those brands has a role to play on its own. But if you look across that and think, well, like, what could we do with like 70 odd years of creativity from Cannes Lions? What could we do with 40 odd years of research and best practice from WARC, 21 years of Contagious content, and then I think it's about 50 to 60 years in from Effie of sort of work that works. That is a huge body of knowledge.
100%.
And what could we do if we started putting it together, started creating combined data sets? And what tools could we build, basically? So that's the big sort of journey that we're on. We're pretty early into it, to be honest. But what we did do in Cannes is launch the Lines Intelligence AI, which is the first. There's some very sophisticated AI stuff coming down the road later this year, but it was the first sort of product that allows you to sort of interrogate these 4 sorts of amazing databases. You can sort of ask it anything, and it will give you this. Depending on what you ask it, the blend will be slightly differently, but it will give you a sort of blend of amazing work, sort of really deep sort of thought leadership from trusted sources. It will tell you about the theory behind things. It will give you sort of practical advice of what to do about stuff. So it's really sort of powerful. And yes, again, go and Google Lines Intelligence if 100%. If you're interested in giving it a try. You can sign up. You can sign up for free and get I think it's 5 to 10 tokens. Sort of out of questions to give it a go. So it's definitely worth playing with. And to go back to some of what I was saying before about how we open this stuff up to a much broader audience, we do see some of these sort of new AI tools as a way into that, because actually,
that's a great point.
We've got such deep information and such specific and niche information that someone like yourself or a sort of strategist at an agency can happily spend whole days just going down rabbit holes, and more power to them if they do. But then there's also a lot of roles in an agency where they just need a quick answer, or they're having to prep for a client meeting or a board meeting or whatever it might be, and just need to sense check something. And the ability to use these tools to get that, to know that you're building off of trusted sources, and then to get that sort of quick, summarized, very pithy sort of response is really powerful, and something we're very excited about.
This just came to me, and maybe it's still too early to tell, but is there how are you seeing agencies and brands use the tool in of itself right now? Is there some emerging themes that you're seeing? Like I said, it's probably still early.
It's still quite early. But listen, I know from what I've seen, the way I've seen people use the other AI tools we've produced. So the WARC one is a good example. So the WARC AI has been around for nearly a year now. And the way people tend to use that is the sort of thing I've just said, is they need a sort of quick read on something. So they're asking us to sort of summarize the database, or they're looking for specific examples of something. So I need yes, obviously you can use search to do that, but actually it's a way of asking richer questions and getting a much more immediate sort of set of things back. Now what we're really excited about is where we sort of take it next, which is away from it just being a cute question and answer tool, and into more of a workflow development tool. So how do we actually plug this much more directly into the strategic process or the creative process, or the way a marketing team might develop strategy, or brief an agency, or those sorts of things. So that's where we're starting to get very excited, because we can see ways to take that knowledge and plug it straight into a workflow. Yeah,
love that. David, how can people find out more about you, the things that you're working on, and on WARC side, obviously the Lion side?
Well, so many of us now, I'm on LinkedIn. So yes, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Always very happy to expand the network across the tools I've mentioned. Obviously, but WARC has a sort of daily newsletter, which is always full of it's
a great one, actually,
full of interesting new takes, and there's the WARC podcast. And so there's lots of stuff. We're always pumping new stuff out. I'm sure there's a more sophisticated term for it, but yes, at times it's just stuff.
I love that. Thanks again for your time, Dave. This was great.
Always a pleasure.